Welcome, dear dreamers, to another night with Whispers of the Night. I'm so glad you're here, ready to slow down, to breathe a little softer, and to let your thoughts drift like leaves on a gentle stream tonight. We're journeying into a story woven from moonlight and memory, a tale called The Midnight Teacup. It's a story about quiet wonder, about a small boy who wakes when the world sleeps, and the cup that remembers the warmth of forgotten dreams. So find a cozy place to rest. Pull your blanket a little closer and let your eyes grow heavy. If you're enjoying these nightly escapes, don't forget to follow Whispers of the Night every week. New stories and dream journeys await you, crafted to guide you gently toward sleep, peace, and a sense of calm you can carry into the morning. Take a deep breath in and exhale slowly. Let the day melt away and allow the soft glow of midnight to carry you inward, toward stillness, toward dreamland, toward the story of the Midnight Teacup. Before we begin our story, let's take a few quiet moments to unwind. Close your eyes, dear dreamer, and notice the air around you, cool and soft, like the first touch of night. Feel your body sink into comfort, the way a feather settles into still air. Inhale deeply through your nose and slowly exhale through your lips. With every breath, imagine your thoughts dimming, one by one, like lamps in a peaceful village. Falling asleep, the sound of the clocks begins to fade. The soft hum of midnight surrounds you. You feel the gentle weight of your blanket, the warmth beneath it, the safety of this moment. As you breathe, picture a little cup on a high shelf, glowing faintly with moonlight. A small boy stands below it, curious and still. The air smells faintly of chamomile and honey. The teacup begins to shimmer. You are there too, in that quiet kitchen, where time moves like a lullaby. Let go now. Let your body feel heavy and light at once. With every breath, the world grows softer, until there is nothing left but peace and the story that waits for you in the next heartbeat. The Midnight Teacup begins now. The Midnight Teacup. The forgotten shelf. Kitchen was a quiet world after midnight. Shadows leaned softly against the walls, and the air felt hushed, as if the house itself were asleep. Dust floated through moonlight that slipped in through a small window, turning the simplest things into something enchanted. The curve of a spoon, the handle of a kettle, the glint of glass jars resting on their shelves. The old clock on the far wall ticked in calm rhythm, keeping company with the stillness. High above the counter, almost lost to time, stood a lonely porcelain teacup. It was small, fine, and hand-painted with faint silver moons that curved around its rim. Once, long ago, it had been the storyteller's favorite, the one used every night when stories poured out like tea, filling the room with warmth and laughter. But the storyteller had grown older, the nights had grown quieter, and the teacup had been placed on the top shelf and forgotten. Years passed as quietly as the ticking of the clock. Cobwebs gathered like fragile lace in the corners, and sometimes the wind would sigh through the cracks of the window, brushing across the shelves like a hand searching for memories. The teacup sat there through it all, patient and still. It could remember voices, laughter, the soft clink of saucers, the warmth of hands that once held it. But now, the only warmth came from the faint touch of moonlight resting on its rim. The old kitchen was full of ghosts of sound, a kettle that sometimes hummed without being lit, a chair that creaked as if remembering weight, a cupboard door that liked to breathe open and shut when the wind played with it. But none of these sounds ever reached the shelf where the teacup slept. It dreamed in porcelain silence, its heart a hollow bowl of memories. Tonight, however, was different. There was something in the air, a quiet hum beneath the tick of the clock. Outside, the moon hung round and silver, its light trembling through the frosty window pane. The hour hand crept closer to 12, and the shadows began to move like gentle ripples in water. Then, tick, the clock struck midnight, and the teacup stirred at first. It was just a shimmer, a faint silver glow that traced the moons painted along its rim. It flickered like a candle, remembering its flame. The glow deepened, flowing down into the bowl, swirling like milk poured into tea. The air trembled softly, carrying the scent of something impossible, a mix of lavender, honey, and warm nights from long ago. A whisper, too faint to hear, brushed through the room. The teacup trembled slightly, as if waking from a long dream. Dust drifted away from its surface, spinning lazily through the air. For the first time in many years, it felt seen below the shelf. The small boy who lived upstairs, Elliot Finch, could not sleep. The ticking of the clock had always been a comfort to him, a sound like a heartbeat that made him feel less alone. His father's clock shop downstairs was filled with hundreds of them, all ticking, all whispering time into the night. But tonight, there was a different sound, almost musical sigh from the kitchen. Elliot sat up in bed, his chestnut hair messy from sleep, his eyes bright with the kind of curiosity that never really rests. He slipped out of bed quietly, his bare feet touching the cool wooden floor. Around his wrist, the small brass key his father had given him chimed softly as it brushed against his nightshirt. The house was dark, except for the pale blue light of the moon filtering through the hallway window. He made his way to the kitchen, careful not to wake anyone. The door creaked softly as he pushed it open. Inside, the air shimmered faintly, like morning mist caught in moonlight. His eyes widened. The glow was coming from above, from the top shelf. He dragged over a chair, its legs scratching quietly against the floor, and climbed up just enough to peek over the counter. And there it was, the teacup, glowing gently, like it was breathing light. For a long moment, Elliot just stared. The glow wasn't bright or frightening. It was gentle, like something that wanted to be remembered rather than seen. The silver moons painted on its rim looked alive, their edges soft and glimmering. Elliot whispered, "Hello." The word floated up, fragile as dust. The teacup gave a faint sigh, or maybe it was just the air moving through the room. Elliot smiled nervously. He wasn't scared, Somehow he felt as though the teacup had been waiting, not for anyone in particular, but for someone curious enough to look. He reached out his hand, but didn't touch it. The warmth from the teacup reached him anyway, gentle and soft, like a cup of cocoa remembered from years ago. His heart thudded quietly. The clock struck again, 1 minute past midnight. The teacup's light pulsed in time with it. Then, from deep inside the bowl, came a faint shimmer of movement, a swirl of silver steam that rose slowly, forming shapes in the air. Elliot watched as the mist unfurled into delicate patterns, like drawings made of moonlight. He could almost make out pictures, a hand pouring tea, a smile, a quill moving across a page. Memories, he realized. The teacup was remembering the steam curled around him, wrapping the kitchen in a soft glow. The ticking of the clock grew slower, almost like a lullaby. The warmth of the air made him sleepy, but he couldn't look away. He whispered again, "Who are you?" This time, there was a faint hum, a note, like the first sound of a song. It vibrated softly in the air, resonating with something deep inside him. He felt, somehow, that the teacup was not answering with words, but with feelings. And what it told him wasn't a name, but a story of warmth and time, and the quiet ache of being forgotten. The teacup remembered the storyteller, an old man with gentle eyes who used to sit by the fire, notebook open, cup steaming beside him. Night after night, he would whisper his stories into the steam, as though the teacup were listening. And maybe it was. Maybe it always had been. Elliot saw these memories flicker in the mist, scenes painted in light. The storyteller's hands, the candlelight flickering in the window, the laughter that once filled this same kitchen. He felt tears prick his eyes without knowing why. It wasn't sadness, exactly, more like longing for something he'd never had, yet somehow remembered. The steam thinned, then vanished. The glow dimmed, returning the kitchen to its soft, gray stillness. Only the moonlight remained, and the faint ticking of the clock resumed its rhythm. Elliot stood quietly on the chair, the brass key on his wrist glinting faintly. He looked once more at the teacup, now calm and ordinary again, but he could still feel its warmth in the air, a lingering trace of its awakening. He whispered, "I'll come back tomorrow night," and climbed down from the chair. The kitchen returned to its slumber. The moon drifted higher, painting soft shapes across the floorboards. Elliot paused at the door and turned back once more. The teacup sat perfectly still, yet something had changed. It wasn't just porcelain anymore. It was alive with memory, quiet, patient, and waiting. Upstairs, when Elliot returned to bed, the faint hum of ticking clocks followed him into dreams. He dreamt of silver moons painted on porcelain, of gentle hands pouring stories like tea, and of a whisper that sounded almost like his name. And in the kitchen, beneath the slow turning of the night, the teacup gave a final sigh. A faint shimmer ran along its rim, not of loneliness, but of hope. The forgotten shelf no longer felt forgotten. Somewhere between the tick of the clock and the breath of the moon, a story had begun again. The whisper of steam. The night after the teacup's first shimmer, the world seemed to breathe differently. Even the air in the old house carried a hum, something gentle, unspoken, but alive. The clocks ticked softly, as if aware that time was watching them. Down in the kitchen, the moonlight waited, cool and patient, stretching across the floor like a silver ribbon. Elliot Finch lay awake in his small room above the clock shop. His window faced the moon, and the moon, in turn, seemed to be looking right back at him. He couldn't stop thinking about the glow he'd seen the night before, the way the teacup had shimmered as though it had a heartbeat of its own. The image lingered behind his eyelids, even as he blinked at the ceiling. He felt the brass key on his wrist, turning it gently between his fingers. It was a habit now, a quiet rhythm to match the clocks downstairs. When the clock struck midnight again, the sound threaded through the silence, soft and certain, tick, tick, tick. Then, faintly, whir, the cuckoo clock in the kitchen stirred. Its gears shifted, its springs sighed, and Elliot smiled. Something was calling him again. He slipped from bed, careful not to wake his father. His wool vest hung on the chair. He pulled it over his nightshirt and padded down the narrow staircase. Each step creaked like an old secret. When he reached the kitchen door, he hesitated for just a heartbeat, then turned the handle. The air greeted him like a memory. A cool hush wrapped around him, touched with the faint sweetness of tea leaves long gone. The moonlight streamed through the small window, painting silver shapes on the counters. And there, once again, the teacup waited on the top shelf, glowing faintly, just enough for Elliot to find it in the dark. Its light wasn't constant. It pulsed, soft and rhythmic, like breathing. Elliot dragged the same chair as before and climbed up. The teacup shimmered, and he smiled. "Hello again," he whispered. "I told you I'd come back." For a moment, the teacup seemed still, perfectly ordinary. Then, a soft sound, low and musical, rose from within it. Elliot leaned closer, and a wisp of mist unfurled from its rim. It rose slowly, curling through the air, catching bits of moonlight as it went. The mist shimmered with faint colors, silver and pearl. Like light seen through tears, the teacup began to breathe. Soft steam flowed over its edge, gentle and constant, shaping itself into forms that dissolved and reformed clouds, stars, and little flickering fragments of dreams. Elliot's eyes widened as he watched the air fill with shimmering shapes. He could almost see stories in them. A tiny moon drifted past his face, made entirely of vapor. Behind it came a faint outline of a ship, its sails woven from starlight. The mist shifted again, becoming a sleeping cat curled on an invisible windowsill, then a child's hand reaching for a teapot. Every image seemed familiar, yet strange, like something remembered from a dream you weren't sure you'd had. Elliot reached up, letting the steam swirl around his fingers. It was warm, not hot, not cold, but alive. When it touched his skin, it carried feelings more than sensations. Comfort, quiet laughter, the smell of old books and honey tea. He closed his eyes, and for a heartbeat, he could almost hear a voice. Once upon a midnight, the words were faint, almost made of air. He opened his eyes quickly, heart beating fast. "Who said that?" he whispered. But there was no one, only the teacup, still glowing, still breathing. The steam continued to rise, filling the kitchen with its soft, shifting light. Elliot could feel it, not just see it. The teacup was remembering again, this time the mist showed an older scene, a man sitting by a fire, the same one Elliot had seen glimpses of the night before. The man's face was kind and lined with time. His eyes sparkled as he stirred his tea, steam curling around him like a dream. Elliot leaned forward. He could almost hear the man's voice now, low, gentle, full of stories that never hurried. Wishes. You whisper them into the cup, and they stay warm forever. Elliot's eyes softened. You were his cup, he murmured, speaking to the porcelain. Weren't you? The mist shimmered in answer. A faint sigh escaped the teacup. Not sad, exactly, but wistful. The silver moons painted along its rim glowed a little brighter, as if in memory of the nights it once served tea to that storyteller. The kitchen filled with warmth. It didn't come from the stove or the fire, but from the teacup itself. The air shimmered, alive with invisible words and sighs. Elliot could feel the pull of something old and tender, a conversation carried across time. He whispered into the mist. Do you remember all of them? The stories. The steam hesitated, swirling into a small spiral before dissolving. Then new shapes appeared, fragments of scenes, a child's laughter, the curve of a fountain pen, a night when rain tapped softly against the window. Each image lasted only a second before vanishing into the next, like pages turning on their own. Elliot smiled through the soft ache in his chest. You do, he said. You remember everything. And then he noticed something strange. When the steam brushed the window pane, frost bloomed in delicate patterns, not random lines, but symbols, little stars, moons, and shapes that looked like words written in another kind of script. The language shimmered briefly, glowing faintly gold before fading. The teacup was trying to speak. Elliot took a step closer, his breath fogging the glass. He traced one of the frost symbols with his finger, but it melted immediately, vanishing into a bead of water. The warmth of his touch seemed to ripple through the air, and the teacup's glow pulsed once more. Then gently it exhaled. The steam filled the kitchen one last time, wrapping around Elliot like a soft blanket. He felt suddenly drowsy, as though the mist were singing him a lullaby. He sat down on the chair, his legs dangling, the brass key on his wrist glinting faintly in the moonlight. The hum of the clocks grew distant. The world seemed to slow down, almost to stillness in that silence. The teacup's sigh sounded like a story being told by the night itself. It spoke of warmth and time, of the way stories linger even after the storyteller is gone, of the quiet hope that someone, someday, might listen again. Elliot didn't need to understand the words. He could feel them. They settled into him like soft rain soaking into soil. He thought about the storyteller who had once whispered wishes into the teacup. Did he ever know it had listened? Did he ever feel the warmth it carried, even after he was gone? Elliot wondered if all the clocks downstairs were listening too, if every tick was a kind of remembering. The mist began to fade. One by one, the shapes dissolved, turning to faint sparkles before disappearing completely. The kitchen returned to its moonlit stillness. The only sound left was the heartbeat rhythm of the clock. Elliot looked up at the teacup again. Its glow was dimming, but he could still feel the warmth in the air. It had spoken to him in its own way, a language made of steam and silence. He whispered, "Thank you," and meant it. As he climbed down from the chair, he glanced back one last time. The teacup rested quietly, faintly gleaming like a candle at the edge of sleep. The frost on the window pane lingered for a moment longer, then melted into silver drops. Elliot reached out and touched one, and for a heartbeat, he thought he heard the faintest whisper in the air, a voice made of steam and memory. "Good night," he smiled. "Good night," he replied softly. Then he left the kitchen, the brass key on his wrist chiming lightly with each step. Upstairs, he slipped into bed, the echo of warmth still in his hands. His dreams that night were full of clouds that whispered stories, and teacups that sighed in moonlight. And in the kitchen, the teacup sat quietly on its shelf, watching the moon begin its slow descent. It remembered every story ever told into its rim, every wish, every breath, every moment of gentle company. But tonight, for the first time in many years, it also remembered the sound of a child's voice, soft, curious, and kind. The memory lingered like steam, curling through the air long after everything else had gone still. The teacup sighed, its glow fading with the moon. A drop of water rolled down its porcelain side, catching the light like a tear, or perhaps a wish finally coming true. And somewhere above, a brass key glinted faintly as the boy drifted into dreams. The visitor from the clock. Midnight. Perhaps it was the way the world seemed to hold its breath, or how every sound became softer, rounder, more secret. Or perhaps it was because time itself felt looser then, as if you could slip between minutes like threads in a worn quilt and find something waiting. The night began like the last one. The moon hung high, casting its silver light across the rooftops and sliding gently through the kitchen window. Dust floated in slow, sleepy patterns. The old clock on the wall ticked with its steady heart, its brass pendulum swinging like a sigh. The memory of the whispering steam still lingered in his thoughts, the way it had curled into shapes, how it had seemed to speak to him. All day he had thought of little else. He had even tiptoed into the kitchen in daylight, hoping to see the teacup shimmer again. But in the sun's bright glow, it looked perfectly ordinary, pale porcelain, faint moons around the rim. Nothing unusual at all. But now the moon was back, and Elliot felt that strange, sweet pull once more, as if something downstairs was calling his name without a sound. He slipped on his vest, feeling the brass key against his wrist, and crept down the staircase. The air was cool and familiar. The moment he opened the kitchen door, he knew he had been right. The teacup was glowing again, but this time, the light was different. It wasn't just soft silver. There was gold in it now, faint but alive, flickering like the first light of dawn. The clock on the wall ticked louder, its hands nearing 12 past midnight. Tick, 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 dot, and then click, dot. Elliot froze. The little wooden doors of the cuckoo clock creaked open, but no bird popped out this time. Instead, the sound that followed was something like a sigh and the whir of tiny gears turning for the first time in ages. A soft shimmer spilled from the clock, just like the teacup's glow. And then, stepping carefully out onto the shelf, came a small figure. He couldn't have been taller than Elliot's hand, a tiny man made entirely of clockwork and wonder. His body shimmered with brass and copper, gears gently ticking where a heart might be. His eyes glowed like drops of amber light, and on his head sat a hat made of interlocking gears that turned slowly with a quiet hum. He dusted off his little coat. It looked like it was sewn from threads of time itself, and straightened his hat. 12:12, he said softly, his voice a chime, always on time, though never late. Elliot's mouth fell open. He blinked twice to make sure he wasn't dreaming. "Hell," he whispered. The small figure looked up at him, smiled, and tipped his tiny hat. "Evening, young watcher," he said, in a voice like the tick of a clock, softened by distance. "And good evening, my old friend." He turned then, not to Elliot, but to the teacup. The cup shimmered in response, its silver moons catching light. A faint hum filled the air, a tone of recognition. The little clockkeeper nodded. "It's been some time," he said gently. "You've waited long," the teacup answered with a sound too quiet to be a word, a sigh of porcelain and warmth. Elliot watched, wide-eyed, as the two seemed to speak without speaking at all. The little man stepped closer to the cup, placing his brass hand against its rim. A faint vibration hummed through the air, like two heartbeats meeting after years apart. "You remember me," the clockkeeper murmured. "That's good. I feared you'd gone cold." Elliot couldn't help but whisper, Who are you?" The little man turned, his brass eyes glinting kindly. "Keeper," he said simply. "Keeper of ticks and talks, of seconds and sighs. I keep time from unraveling when no one's looking." He looked toward the teacup again. "And she," he said, "keeps dreams from fading." Elliot echoed softly. The keeper smiled, "Of course. Cups are always she." She held every whispered wish of a storyteller long ago, kept them warm long after his hands grew still. That's what she was made for, to hold the warmth that stories leave behind. Elliot stepped closer, the floorboards creaking gently. "You knew the storyteller." The keeper tilted his tiny head, the gears in his hat spinning slowly. "Knew him. I counted his hours. I marked every pause between his words. He would sip his tea, tell his tales, and I would watch the moments gather like dust and glow like gold." His voice softened. "When he was gone, the teacup stayed. So did I, but time forgets. You see, it always does." He sighed a faint metallic chime. "Tonight is the last midnight," he said quietly, looking at the teacup. "Before dawn forgets us both." Elliot frowned. "Forget you?" The little keeper nodded. "All things that are remembered by moonlight fade with the day, unless someone new remembers them." He looked up at Elliot with something like hope. "And perhaps you might." Elliot's heart gave a small, surprised ache. "Me?" "You saw her glow when no one else did," the keeper said. "You listened. That's enough." The teacup shimmered again, brighter now. A faint tendril of steam rose, curling toward the little keeper. He stepped forward, his tiny boots tapping softly against the shelf. Then, in a voice as delicate as the hush between chimes, he said, "Shall we?" The teacup's glow deepened to a golden warmth. Elliot felt the air tremble. A faint aroma of honey, sugar, and stars filled the kitchen. The little keeper turned to Elliot. "It's time for one last cup," he said. "The midnight tea. Would you join us?" Elliot hesitated. "But I don't know how." The keeper chuckled softly, the sound like a clock hand turning. You already do. You believe. He reached into his coat and pulled out a tiny silver teaspoon, no bigger than a matchstick. Then he climbed onto the rim of the teacup. All things made of memory and warmth can be stirred again if someone remembers them kindly. He dipped the spoon into the empty teacup. The instant he did, a ripple of light spread outward. The cup filled itself, not with ordinary tea, but with liquid moonlight. It shimmered softly, golden at the edges and silver at its heart. Steam rose again, forming delicate shapes that fluttered through the air. The keeper looked at Elliot. A good brew. This one, he said with a smile, made of what's left behind when time and dreams meet. Elliot leaned closer. What happens now? The keeper dipped his hat politely toward the cup. Now, he said, we remember together. Until dawn comes, we keep the warmth alive. The teacup pulsed once more, and a faint ringing sound filled the air. Not quite music, not quite ticking, but something between. Elliot felt it deep in his chest. The mist that rose this time was different, softer, rounder, shaped like circles of memory. In it, he saw fragments of every moment that had ever passed through the kitchen. The laughter, the stories, the warmth, even the quiet after. The little keeper sat on the rim, sipping from the light, his brass gears glowing faintly. Every story needs a listener, he said gently, looking up at Elliot, and every clock needs a dreamer to believe the hours matter. The boy smiled faintly. Then maybe I can be both. The keeper nodded, the gears in his hat spinning brighter. That, he said, is exactly what we needed. Time slowed then, not stopped, but softened. The ticking of the clock became a heartbeat, the shimmer of steam, a lullaby. Elliot felt his eyes grow heavy, but he fought to keep them open. He didn't want to miss a moment. The little keeper looked toward the window, where the first faint blush of dawn was starting to touch the horizon. Ah, he whispered, the edge of forgetting. He turned back to the teacup, resting a hand on its rim. Until next time, old friend. The teacup shimmered in reply, releasing one final wisp of golden steam that curled around the keeper like a farewell dot. Elliot blinked. The air shimmered once more, and then, with a sound like the soft click of a watch closing, the keeper was gone. The clock on the wall swung its pendulum steadily, as if nothing had happened. The teacup rested silently, faint traces of gold still warming its rim. Elliot stayed there for a long while, listening to the rhythm of the clocks and the echo of the tiny voice. He whispered, almost to himself, I'll remember you, both of you. The light of dawn crept through the window, turning the room pale and soft. The teacup no longer glowed, but when Elliot brushed his fingers along its edge, he could feel a faint hum, the last heartbeat of midnight, still alive beneath the porcelain dot. And for a fleeting second, just as the sun touched the windowsill, the clock gave one quiet tick out of rhythm, a tiny thank you, perhaps, from the keeper of time. The journey through the steam. The teacup trembled for a moment, as if catching its own reflection in the moonlight, before slowly filling itself with liquid silver that shimmered like starlight pooled in porcelain. Elliot leaned closer, his small hands cupping the warm rim, and a gentle breath rose from the tea, curling into delicate tendrils of steam that glowed faintly with a pale, otherworldly light. The air around him grew soft, almost weightless, and with a barely perceptible sigh, the teacup began to lift, floating as if it had always belonged to the sky. Elliot's heart beat with quiet excitement and wonder. The kitchen, the familiar room with its ticking clocks and wooden shelves, faded into a blur of warm shadows. Candlelight flickered in impossible shapes along the walls, stretching and yawning like old friends greeting him from another time. The teacup swirled, carrying him gently upward, and the scent of warm sugar, roasted nuts, and faint vanilla filled the air, mingling with the scent of rain on cobblestone streets somewhere far below. It was both comforting and strange, familiar, yet entirely new, as though the universe itself had wrapped him in a soft cloak of memories he had never lived. The first wisps of steam enveloped him, curling around his arms and legs, whispering like voices of forgotten kitchens. He could hear faint laughter in the swirling Mista giggle, hear the clinking of a spoon against porcelain there. Shadows of long-vanished tea parties drifted past, a mother serving honeyed biscuits to a child with tangled hair, a cat sleeping by a fire, the candlelight flickering across a polished wooden table. Elliot felt the warmth of those moments seep into his own skin, a gentle reassurance that even unseen memories could be tender, even if they belonged to someone else. As they floated higher, the vapor thickened into pools of silver light. Elliot could see his own reflection in them, pale and small, with wide hazel eyes and tousled chestnut hair, framed by the glow of the steam. For a heartbeat, he thought he might be alone. But then the clouds of warmth shifted, revealing landscapes that were not quite real, yet somehow felt familiar. Kitchens stretched into vast halls of light, their floors tiled with patterns that shimmered and shifted like liquid mirrors. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings that dissolved into mist, catching flecks of moonlight and scattering them like diamonds across the air. He reached out a finger, and a droplet of liquid light floated from the chandelier, cool and delicate, melting into the steam as if it had never existed. Rivers of milk flowed alongside them, luminous and slow, reflecting stars that seemed too close to the earth to be real. The teacup glided over them effortlessly, carrying Elliot through currents that smelled faintly of almonds and caramel. Tiny sugar crystal constellations shimmered above, suspended in the air, as if the heavens themselves had spilled their sweetness over this quiet, forgotten world. He could see them drifting, gently spinning in the vapor, and he laughed softly, a sound swallowed by the embrace of the steam. Each star was a miniature memory, he thought, a crystallized piece of warmth and light waiting to be discovered. The vapor thickened further, forming arches and bridges that rose like gentle waves frozen in time. Elliot felt himself drifting through corridors of glowing mist, each each drifts soft and weightless. He passed kitchens where shadows of tiny animals played in the corners, where old wooden tables bore invisible traces of laughter, and teapots hummed with gentle contentment, as if the very walls remembered the joy of being part of a home. Here, he realized, the past and present had blended, creating a realm where nothing was lost, only transformed into memory made tangible. Occasionally, shapes formed in the mist, whimsical and fleeting, A spoon danced across a silver countertop, leaving a trail of light in its wake. A teacup spun slowly in the air, trailing golden ribbons of steam, and Elliot caught the scent of jasmine from it, delicate and faint, like a secret that had been waiting to be told. He reached toward it, but the shape dissolved before he could touch it, leaving only the warm trace of fragrance lingering in the air. He smiled, understanding that here, everything existed only for a moment before transforming again into something equally enchanting. The teacup rose above a vast expanse of dreamlike kitchens, where each island of warmth was bathed in moonlight. Candle flames danced without wind, flickering in perfect rhythm with an unseen melody. Elliot could hear it faintly, a soft, slow tune that seemed to hum through the steam, gentle and lilting. It was the sound of forgotten lullabies, songs sung long ago by hands that had once cradled small children near fires. The music wound through him, wrapping around his chest and shoulders like a velvet scarf. He felt calm, deeply calm, as though the world had stopped just for him, offering a moment of peace that stretched infinitely. Sometimes, the teacup drifted near the edge of reality, where the mist thinned and the air tasted faintly of winter frost. Stars glimmered like tiny lanterns hung in the sky, and he could see shadowy mountains in the distance, their peaks shrouded in soft silver clouds. Rivers of light ran between them, flowing not with water, but with a kind of liquid moonlight, rippling gently as though breathing. Elliot leaned closer to the edge of the cup and let the scent of night mingle with the sweetness of tea. The warmth of the cup against his hands and the coolness of the moonlight against his cheeks made him shiver with delight, a gentle reminder of the world's contrast, soft and firm, warm and cold, known and unknown. Everywhere he looked, movement existed but never rushed. Steam curled in spirals that floated like dancers in slow motion, and shadows flickered like fleeting memories of laughter. The teacup carried him through arches of light that bent and twisted, as if aware of his presence, guiding him like a gentle hand. Small details caught his eye, a sugar cube dissolving into a river of cream, a teaspoon humming softly as it floated along a ribbon of silver, a candle flickering without wax. Each moment felt delicate and eternal, as though time itself had paused in reverence for the quiet beauty of this drifting voyage. Elliot noticed, too, that the vapor whispered, not words in the usual sense, but feelings that brushed against the edges of thought, soft and comforting. A wave of nostalgia, warm and golden, washed over him, carrying the memory of a small hand held by a gentle adult, the taste of honey on a winter morning, the comfort of being safe in a familiar embrace. He realized that the steam was more than mist. It was the accumulation of moments that had passed, the essence of comfort, joy, and quiet reflection. And in that realization, he felt both connected and free, a small part of a much larger, gentle universe, hours or perhaps minutes. For time was irrelevant, here passed, as they floated through this world. The teacup carried him over forests of teapots and sugar trees, their leaves sparkling with crystallized light. Rivers of cream spilled from unseen fountains, pooling in bowls of glimmering silver that reflected the moon's calm gaze. He saw shadows of old kitchens, places he had never been, alive with warmth and care. Each flicker of light and whisper of steam told a story. A grandmother stirring porridge, a father wiping a child's tear, a friend laughing across a candlelit table. And in each story, Elliot felt the quiet pulse of life, of love, and of memory preserved like a treasure in the folds of the mist. The journey carried on without effort, the teacup gliding and spinning through realms made entirely of warmth and light. Elliot felt as though he were swimming through a river of liquid silver, soft and yielding, where gravity had forgotten him and the world had become a canvas painted in gentle, slow strokes. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and rain, of baked bread and distant gardens. He realized that even though he floated alone, he was surrounded by countless invisible companions, the echoes of kitchens, families, laughter, and light that moved with him. Invisible hands guiding him toward some unseen, comforting destination. Eventually, the vapor began to thin, the silver mist giving way to a gentle glow that suggested a threshold, a place where dreams might touch reality. The stars of sugar crystals faded slowly, leaving behind trails of lingering warmth that felt like a soft farewell. Elliot rested his hands against the rim of the teacup, feeling the warmth seep into him, and for the first time, he realized that the journey had changed him, not in ways that could be measured, but in ways that could only be felt, a gentle widening of the heart, a quieting of restless thoughts, a deep, almost reverent appreciation for the tender beauty of forgotten moments. The last wisps of steam curled around him as the teacup descended slowly, carrying him back toward the kitchen from which he had begun. The moonlight gleamed through the window, soft and patient, waiting to welcome him home. Candle flames flickered again on the shelves, tiny beacons in the quiet night, and the air smelled of sugar, tea, and a faint trace of the infinite worlds he had just visited. He let out a slow breath and felt the gentle weight of the ordinary returning. Yet the extraordinary lingered inside him, quiet and steadfast. The journey through the steam had not ended, he realized, because its memory would follow him, a gentle river of warmth, light, and infinite possibility, flowing silently within the heart, whispering always of the worlds that exist between the moments we think we know. And so the teacup rested once more on the table, ordinary in appearance, but extraordinary in essence, holding within it the lingering echoes of silver rivers, sugar stars, candlelit kitchens, and the tender, soft magic of all the journeys that had ever been dreamed in silence. Elliot sat beside it, his hands folded in his lap, feeling the quiet hum of life and dream intertwined, ready for whatever the night might bring next, and yet carrying forever the gentle, timeless serenity of a voyage. The memory poured back. The night outside pressed its quiet fingers against the window panes, drawing long shadows that pooled lazily across the floor. The kitchen, now hushed and still, seemed to hold its breath, listening. Elliot's small hands rested on the table, the teacup before him glowing softly with an inner light that pulsed like a heartbeat. It was no longer just a vessel of tea, nor merely a curious object floating on the whim of moonlight. Tonight, it seemed to know itself, aware of a duty it had carried through ages of quiet, forgotten nights, to cradle warmth, to guard dreams, and to deliver memories that had lingered too long in shadow. The liquid inside shimmered gently, a pale gold that flickered like sunlight through mist. It had traveled with Elliot through realms of steam and dream, across rivers of cream and skies of sugar crystals, past kitchens that existed only in the hush between moments. And now, as the night deepened into its most intimate hour, the teacup began to remember, in its own quiet way, what it had always been meant to do. Memories, both tender and long forgotten, stirred in the liquid, rising like bubbles from the bottom, fragile and bright. Each held a fragment of laughter, a scent of cinnamon, the echo of a soft lullaby, the brush of fingers across an old, worn wooden table. Elliot watched, mesmerized, as the surface rippled with the faintest sigh. Tiny sparks of light formed and shimmered just above the rim, like fireflies caught in a gentle current. They hovered for a moment, suspended, as if deciding which memory would be carried first. And then, one by one, the droplets lifted, glowing faintly, spinning in slow, deliberate arcs. The first drop, gold and warm, drifted upward like a leaf caught in a sunbeam, and Elliot could feel the essence of its oft, calm, full of gentle reassurance settle against the edges of his chest. He realized, with a quiet wonder, that this memory was for him, though he had never lived it. It was a gift of feeling, a whisper of the comfort that the world had offered long before he had known to ask for it. The next drop followed, brighter and tinged with faint amber. Inside, it swirled a childhood song, sung long ago by a mother whose voice had left only echoes in a forgotten house. Elliot could hear it, faint yet unmistakable, and it pressed against his heart like the brush of a soft sleeve. The teacup trembled gently under his hands, as if acknowledging the weight of its purpose, and from its tremor spilled another memory, the scent of bread fresh from the oven, the golden crust warm against palms, the quiet hum of the hearth in the background. Elliot breathed deeply, letting the warmth of the memory seep into him. For a moment, he felt the world outside the kitchen vanish entirely, replaced by a soft universe where only comfort, light, and gentle recollection existed. Time seemed to slow as the teacup continued its work. Each drop of tea transformed, taking on a light of its own. A tiny droplet glowed like moonlight and drifted slowly upward, carrying the memory of a quiet afternoon in a sunlit room where the faint smell of herbs lingered in the air. Elliot's mind swirled with the image of a child, older than he, perhaps, sitting cross-legged on a wooden floor, tracing shapes in the dust with delicate fingers, while a cat purred in the corner, soft and content. The memory was fleeting, yet it left a warmth behind, a subtle pulse that reminded him of the small wonders in simple things, sunlight caught in glass, the sound of quiet companionship, the comfort of being watched over without expectation. Another droplet lifted, this one tinged with silver. Inside, it swirled the image of candlelight flickering across a polished table, catching on the edges of crystal glasses and the rims of delicate teacups. The shadows it cast danced on the walls like slow-moving whispers, and Elliot felt a shiver of recognition, though he could not place from where. The memory was old, ancient perhaps, belonging not to him, yet it nestled into the soft corners of his heart as if it had always been waiting there. He realized that the teacup carried more than just tea carried stories. Emotions, fragments of time that had been poured carefully into its depths, waiting for a night like this to return them to someone who could hold them gently. Once more Elliot leaned closer, his face bathed in the glow, and noticed that the final drop of tea quivered at the surface, heavier than the rest, glowing with a light both warm and pure. It did not float immediately, but lingered, as though gathering courage for the journey ahead. The teacup seemed to breathe, expanding slightly with each slow rise and fall, and Elliot felt a soft pulse beneath his fingertips, the rhythm of memories being prepared for release. When the droplet finally lifted, it shone brighter than the others, a tiny star in miniature, carrying the culmination of all the comfort and gentle dreams the teacup had ever held. As it rose, the light seemed to hum, a quiet vibration that resonated in the small of Elliot's back and in the hollow of his chest. He could feel the essence of countless nights, the calm moments shared over tea, the quiet joys of watching steam curl from a cup, the subtle reassurance of warmth on a cold evening pouring back into him. The memory carried with it not just images or scents, but a sense of belonging, of being cradled by the world, tender and unjudged. He closed his eyes, letting it settle, letting the warmth spread like honey through the threads of his being. The teacup itself shimmered faintly as the last of the tea swirled, forming a soft vortex of steam that rose and dissipated slowly into the kitchen's gentle air. The tiny droplets had vanished into light, yet their essence remained, floating invisibly, a delicate warmth that brushed against his heart. Elliot felt his eyelids grow heavy, his thoughts slowing, his mind softening into the rhythm of the night. It was as though the memories themselves were breathing with him, exhaling calm, inhaling quiet, filling the spaces inside him that he had not known were empty. Outside, the moon hung low, casting silver light over the rooftops. The shadows of the night stretched lazily, mirroring the slow, peaceful pulse that had settled in the room. The air smelled faintly of tea, sugar, and distant candle wax, a combination that seemed to whisper of old kitchens and long-remembered nights. Elliot leaned his head toward the teacup, feeling the residual warmth seep into him, and for a moment he imagined that the cup could speak, that it could tell him everything it had seen, everything it had carried. But even in its silence, the message was clear. Warmth could travel, memories could return, and comfort could always be poured back to where it was needed most. The teacup, now nearly empty, sat quietly, its glow fading to a soft, reassuring shimmer. Elliot traced a finger along its rim, feeling the faint pulse of the memories that lingered like an echo. He could sense the gentle paths of light that had carried each drop, the invisible trails of warmth winding from the teacup to the very corners of his heart. The world felt softer now, quieter, filled with possibilities that had always existed but had been hidden beneath layers of ordinary days. He realized that even when the teacup was still, even when it seemed like an ordinary object once more, it had left a permanent imprint within him, a soft, gentle reminder of the care that lingered in small moments and the quiet magic of remembered joy. Elliot sat for a long time, the night stretching on in calm indifference, yet everything within him had shifted. He could feel the steady rhythm of the teacup's purpose, the slow pulse of memories returning home, the quiet resonance of warmth filling the spaces he had not known were empty. The smallest details of the room shadows along the shelves, the ticking of distant clocks, the faint hum of the world outside suddenly seemed alive with the echo of countless other nights, of countless other cups of tea poured and memories returned. He realized that this night, this journey, would remain with him always, not as a story to tell, but as a soft current flowing endlessly beneath the surface of his quiet thoughts. At last, as the first hint of dawn brushed the edges of the horizon, Elliot leaned back, letting the teacup rest fully in his hands. The glow had dimmed to the faintest shimmer, like the last ember of a fire waiting to be remembered. He felt the memory's warmth settle into the small, private corners of his heart, a gentle reminder of the night's journey, of the comfort that had traveled from teacup to soul. And in that moment, the room, the night, and the world beyond it seemed to hold a collective breath, honoring the quiet miracle of memory poured back, of dreams restored, of comfort returned. And so the night ended, not with a rush of light or sound, but with a soft exhalation, a gentle sigh of fulfillment that lingered long after the teacup sat still. Elliot closed his eyes, the warmth spreading across his chest, and the echo of the memories like a lullaby. The teacup had completed its purpose, yet its presence remained, a silent guardian of gentle dreams, of memories restored, of comfort always ready to flow when the heart needed it most. In the hush of that quiet kitchen, he drifted into the slow embrace of sleep, carrying with him the soft glow of light, warmth, and remembered joy, knowing that the memory poured back would always remain, a tender current beneath the pulse of every ordinary, yet infinitely precious tomorrow. When morning comes, the first thread of dawn slipped gently through the cracks of the window, spilling pale gold across the kitchen floor. The shadows of night stretched one last time, lingering in the corners as if reluctant to leave, and then slowly receded, folding themselves back into the quiet stillness of early morning. The teacup sat on the wooden table, unassuming and ordinary at first glance, yet it radiated a soft, almost imperceptible warmth. Steam no longer swirled above it, but the faint memory of it lingered in the air, a delicate hum that seemed to vibrate in time with the awakening world. Elliot stirred in his small chair, his fingers brushing lightly against the smooth rim of the cup. Though he had fallen asleep, a part of him still floated between dream and reality, caught in the gentle reverberation of the night's journey. The glow of the teacup's magic had faded, leaving only a trace-like sunlight resting on a window pane long after the sun has moved. He could feel the warmth in his chest, subtle yet unmistakable, as if the cup had left a thread of calm and comfort woven into his very being. The tiny light of memories poured back the night before had not vanished. It lingered quietly, brushing against the corners of his heart, a gentle pulse that would carry him far beyond the walls of this small kitchen. Outside, the world stirred slowly. Birds began their morning songs, hesitant and soft at first, then stronger as the light grew. Leaves shimmered with dew, catching the dawn's first rays and scattering them across the garden in a mosaic of silver. A distant wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of damp earth and flowering blooms, blending with the faint sweetness that still hovered above the teacup. The kitchen, though silent, seemed alive with the resonance of the night's magic. Every surface, every shadow bore a whisper of the journey that had unfolded here. A story that had passed unseen yet left a quiet mark on the air itself. From the far corner of the room, the little clock-keeper stirred. Though small and fragile, he moved with precision, his tiny brass gears clicking softly as he readjusted the miniature hat on his head. His journey through the night's steam had ended, and the soft paths of light had guided him safely back to the quiet safety of his clockwork home. He paused for a moment, looking toward the teacup, his tiny hands resting lightly on the polished table. Though no words were spoken, there was a sense of understanding, a silent acknowledgement that the night's work was complete. The memories had been carried back to the hearts of those who needed them, and now the world could rest, wrapped in the gentle afterglow of comfort and warmth. Still half asleep, felt the presence of the tiny keeper. Though he could not fully see him, he sensed a small, reassuring hum, like the faint ticking of a distant clock, marking time with quiet certainty. The kitchen seemed to exhale, releasing the final tendrils of vapor from the night, as though the air itself had been holding its breath. Dust motes drifted lazily in the sunlight, catching on invisible currents that whispered of journeys taken, of laughter shared, of tea poured, and memories restored. Everything felt suspended in that perfect moment between night and morning, a fragile boundary where the extraordinary brushed gently against the ordinary, though now still seemed to hold a secret weight, a quiet importance that belied its simple appearance. Elliot reached out and lifted it, feeling the faint warmth seep into his small fingers. The surface was smooth, almost soothing, and he could sense the gentle pulse of all the memories it had carried back through the night. He traced the rim with his thumb, imagining the countless droplets of light that had floated upward, carrying whispers of kitchens long forgotten, laughter long unheard, and lullabies sung across generations. Each droplet had returned to its intended place, he realized, but a small part of their magic remained in the teacup, a gentle reminder that warmth and comfort could linger far longer than the moments in which they were given. The little clock-keeper, now moving with deliberate care, began the journey back to his small, hidden home within the cuckoo clock. His brass feet clicked lightly against the wood, leaving faint, echoing imprints on the floor. Though tiny, his presence filled the room with the sense of continuity, of cycles maintained and promises kept. Elliot watched, half awake, as the keeper disappeared into the shadows, the quiet ticking fading until it merged with the natural rhythm of the waking day. The night had passed, the journey of steam and light complete, yet the afterglow lingered, subtle and tender, a gentle heartbeat within the very air outside. The sunlight grew stronger, brushing against rooftops and streets, spilling into rooms that had not seen such light for hours. Somewhere far away, beyond the reach of Elliot's small kitchen, a figure stirred in their bed. Perhaps it was a child, perhaps an adult, but the sensation was the same, a quiet, inexplicable sense of peace, a soft sigh that seemed to rise from the depths of the heart, and with it came a strange, sudden craving for tea, though no kettle had been boiled, no cup had been poured. It was as if the night itself had sent a small, shimmering gift through the currents of the world, a memory of comfort and warmth delivered to those who would carry it. Without knowing how or why, Elliot felt the faintest tug of drowsiness. His body still wrapped in the quiet reverie of the night's journey. He rested his head against the table, the teacup close by, and let his thoughts drift lazily. He could still feel the echo of silver rivers and sugar crystal constellations. The hum of steam and the gentle pulse of memories returned. Even though the mist had faded and the last traces of light had vanished, a sense of calm lingered, threading through the small rhythms of the kitchen, the ticking of the clock, the faint creak of floorboards, the soft breath of the world waking. The teacup seemed to smile in its stillness, a vessel unchanged, yet forever transformed by the journey it had undertaken. Elliot could almost hear it whisper, though no words were spoken, telling him that even the simplest objects could hold magic if only one believed. The warmth in its porcelain walls was no longer just heat. It was the quiet residue of love, of attention, of all the small, careful acts that had gone unnoticed in countless kitchens across countless nights. And though the night had ended, the presence of that warmth would remain, a subtle, enduring heartbeat within the room and within Elliot himself. For a moment, the teacup, as it had been before he had discovered it, sitting quietly in the shadows of a forgotten shelf, waiting for someone who would carry it through the night. Its purpose had always been clear, though invisible to most eyes: to hold gentle dreams, to cradle warmth, to deliver fragments of memory where they were needed. Tonight, it had fulfilled that purpose, and now, in the soft dawn, it rested, quiet and unassuming, yet imbued with a depth of meaning that stretched far beyond the simple act of holding tea. The kitchen seemed to expand slightly in the morning light, the walls softening as if breathing in the new day. Shadows shifted with a slow grace, dancing over surfaces in the gentle glow. Elliot could hear the faintest echoes of laughter and humming, the ghostly remnants of the night's journey winding through the air. He smiled, his eyes half closed, sensing the delicate threads of comfort that had been woven invisibly into the world. It was a reminder that even in ordinary spaces, extraordinary magic could exist, quiet, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The sun rose higher, scattering light across the floorboards and through the glass, reflecting in tiny prisms that danced like playful spirits. Elliot felt the warmth in the teacup deepen ever so slightly, a soft reassurance that the night's journey had not truly ended, but had simply passed into a quieter form, subtle and enduring. Each ray of sunlight seemed to acknowledge the work that had been done, brushing over surfaces, wrapping around the teacup, and carrying with it the echoes of silver rivers, sugar stars, and whispered lullabies. The kitchen was no longer merely a room. It was a repository of gentle magic, a cradle of comfort and memory that would linger long after the day began, far away. The unknown sleeper stirred fully now, a gentle smile brushing across their lips as the sense of peace rooted itself within them. The craving for tea persisted, soft and unexplainable, a faint tug that led them, perhaps, to the kettle, to the cup, to the quiet moment of warmth that would carry the echo of last night's magic. Elliot imagined this ripple extending far beyond the walls of his kitchen, a quiet wave of calm and comfort touching countless hearts in ways unseen. It was the work of the teacup, the reward of patience, the gentle triumph of kindness woven into the ordinary fabric of life. Elliot finally rose, stretching his small arms, and set the teacup gently back on the table. The warmth lingered faintly, as if the cup itself had breathed a sigh of satisfaction. The kitchen was still bathed in the soft gold of morning, yet it was alive in subtle ways. A flicker of light across the wooden counter, the faint hum of distant clocks, the soft whisper of wind moving through the trees. The world had awakened, carrying with it the quiet legacy of a night spent in dreams. In memory, in the gentle alchemy of warmth, returned. And so, the day began not with clamor or haste, but with quiet reverence. The teacup remained unassuming and ordinary in appearance, yet extraordinary in essence. It had carried dreams and returned memories, had held warmth and poured it into the hearts of those who could receive it. Elliot, nestled in the gentle cradle of early morning, understood only a part of its magic, yet that part was enough. For even in the simplicity of dawn, he felt the soft, enduring pulse of the night's work. Comfort returned, peace delivered, a tiny light sent into the world to remind someone, somewhere, that warmth and gentle dreams could always find their way home. And somewhere, far away, someone rose, carrying within them a quiet glow of inexplicable comfort, a soft craving for tea, and the subtle, infinite reassurance that even ordinary mornings could hold the extraordinary, that the night's magic lingered, and that the gentle work of memory poured back could travel far beyond the edges of sleep. The teacup rested quietly, content, knowing its purpose had been fulfilled once again, leaving the world a little softer, a little warmer, and infinitely more tender than it had been before. And as the story drifts away, morning begins to bloom beyond your window. The teacup grows still again, holding only warmth and peace, the same peace you now carry in your heart. Rest easy, dear dreamer, until we meet again under another moon. You've been listening to Whispers of the Night. Sleep well.